Back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Wednesday, June 28th. Starting a little bit late today, later in the evening, they've got a survey here around the Legend Anthology Academy Festival and the Synchro Festival, which doesn't seem like it would give you any reward, but I almost have half a mind to give them a piece of my mind, as it were, as far as just how terrible that whole setup really was. And you can see that one of these festivals has just been removed, but the World Festival is still viewable. I played a little off screen, and we are in a weird position where I'll have to play some more off screen for the Synchro Festival because I did make it to Platinum, so it makes no sense in the world with only a few days left to play ranked at all. Like, I'm not going to get up to Diamond in that time. These World Championship finals, I think, are just going to stay around until the World Championships actually happen. But yeah, we're in a very weird position, which might make it an easier stream today, but we still have daily quests to do. We still would potentially want to synchro summon at least 2 more times. Gotta log in the daily Duel Live. On top of all of that, there is also a potential here where I might just jump into the Harry Potter game, which is now available. Like, the main complaint, both of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and Magic the Gathering, is that both games are extremely long in the tooth. 25 plus years for Yu-Gi-Oh! Even longer for Magic. And so you've got a very complicated games in those aspects that often have extremely long turns with major one-turn kill strategies where you just don't really get to play much. Seems like we got barely 3 new cards opening 20 packs. We got Beast Rising and Blackwing Revenge and Mama Maki. And then everything else is something we already had. Now, it's kind of interesting that you get Demise Agent of Armageddon this way, because you get this card also from just doing the tutorials. You, some of the solo modes give you a deck with that card. Same way we have the World Championship here, but we don't have any packs that we can spend. And this 14 days left, I suppose. And then we're just waiting for 14 days for this to, I suppose, change and see if we get anything else new. So yeah, there is potentially an argument there. Well, dip my toe into the Harry Potter card game, see if it seems like something that could be reasonable that people might stick with. Now, inherently, now is not really the point to put a lot of faith in Warner Brothers and Harry Potter. I assume this is a Warner Brothers license, but maybe it's not. Because, you know, Warner Brothers is having financial troubles, to say the least, and they've never really supported much as far as any of their games. I don't think I could name a single long-running Warner Brothers game that has gotten enough support. Even some of the other Harry Potter games don't seem like they probably have enough support around them. And of course, I'd have this issue in which I would need actual free time. I'm also playing the Lord of the Rings card game at the moment, so it would be absolutely insane to yet play a third card game I did log into Magic Arena on Steam and noticed that they gave me about 25 or 30 packs that I didn't even bother opening. They've made some slight updates to Magic the Gathering Arena, but that's pretty much all I can say with it. The vast majority of all the cards I have are not playable because of the rolling release schedule of Magic the Gathering. So to go back to Magic the Gathering, if I even wanted to, which I don't, because they accused me of cheating and locked me out for like 3 days of my account, which was A, a false accusation, and B, the first time anybody has even begun to have any complaint as far as my style of gameplay on any kind of game. So, yeah. Mostly I'm just migrating my account so I don't forget the password. I guess it was the reason to do that. I also looked at Marvel Snap on Steam, and it's still very much in beta and just a exact one-for-one copy of the mobile phone version of the game. So I'm not really feeling very motivated to do an update on Marvel Snap, even though I've continued to play it, because this new Conquest mode really would just lead me to complaining about the Conquest mode. So, yeah. What else have I been doing? I've just been busy with other stuff, non-YouTube stuff. I've noticed I've gotten some more comments and possibly some more views in the past couple of days, and the videos that are getting views are the YouTube shorts that have specific names for specific games. So that clearly was the right move to go through. Which retroactively does bring about an interesting thought that maybe I should have just worked through the pain effectively and manually named each and every YouTube short. That would have been a lot, though. Like in the past 7 days, 48 YouTube shorts have gone out. To manually name that, I would never get it done. Like, that's just too much work. Yeah, and for the foreseeable couple of days, I'm still probably going to be fairly busy. So, maybe by Monday, the hope will be that I'll be back to a fairly normal standard schedule. Of course, my schedules, particularly in the summer, have not been ever very standard. It gets hot, I fall asleep a lot. I've been sick. That also probably is having me fall asleep more, but just general insomnia has me falling asleep more. So, yeah. If anything, I hope I can just power through the Lord of the Rings card game. Then I think I might want to play Shadow of Shadow of War. Someone did a YouTube video specifically talking about how they patented that Nemesis system for Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, and then did absolutely nothing with it after that. So, if anything, it is a great example of how the patent system on technologies and methods and things like that is just like horribly broken. It stopped making any sense at all probably 100 to 150 years ago. The idea that somebody patented and could build a real model of a better printing press, which is what the patent system originally was. And you had to build a working model. It could be to scale, it didn't have to be a one-to-one scale, but it had to be a working model and submitted to the patent office. That's where it kind of makes sense that maybe this person has a technology and they have a thought and they deserve to be rewarded for this thought by some way, by licensing out their patented technology and method, but to make potentially a better printing press, better loom, better weaver, things like that. The problem is once you get into the digital era, where even complicated things are not things you can build a real world model on, and the patent offices does not require models anymore, working models or any other kind of models at all. And the first to market benefit is now far outweighing the idea of what a patent should have benefited somebody. The monopolistic tendencies of people holding patents to dominate a market. And in general, you really shouldn't be able to patent a simple idea. And the phrase simple in that should expand further and further as the years go forward. If somebody introduced the idea of quantum physics 200 years ago, they probably deserve a patent for concepts and ideas around that, although that would be something in nature and a way of describing something in nature, not really something patentable. But I guess the thing to say here is if somebody made a quantum computer 200 years ago, totally reasonable that somebody would have a patent and for a limited time be allowed to have a monopoly on that idea and not have people copy them. It does stick your head in the ground, the patent system, quite a bit, assuming that there's just no other countries like China that would rip off your product regardless of whether you have a patent in the United States, or that there wouldn't even be companies inside the United States that would rip off your idea and not get caught. And inherently the patent system only benefits somebody rich enough to defend their patent vigorously with millions of dollars. But in modern times, to complete my thought, if you made a quantum computer, it probably doesn't deserve as long of a patent or a patent at all, because quantum computers are something kind of everybody knows about and everybody has a general idea of what they might do or what they could do. It might be better, instead of using quantum computers as an example there, a calculator. Like if you made a calculator 200 years ago, yes, you deserve a patent. If you invented a calculator today, it's such a obvious and simple device, relatively speaking, it doesn't deserve as much protection. But yeah, anyways, I was thinking about maybe playing Shadow of War, just because Lord of the Rings, the adventure card game, is so incredibly slow and boring as a game. It would be a very good contrast to say, hey, here's the kind of Lord of the Rings game I would prefer to play, one where you're just running and hacking and slashing and shooting arrows into hundreds of orcs. And particularly in Shadow of Mordor, there's no thought really given to the idea of what's the right word to say? Yeah, there's really no story or theming focus around Shadow of Mordor. It's just really, I'd say, 90% action. Where the Lord of the Rings adventure card game gives you 10 minutes of dialogue before you even start playing a game. And the card game is just a little too generic, a little too simple. I did run into a section that feels fairly difficult, and I may have to do something around that. Once again, I'm trying to do the synchro summons, and I'm just not getting enough things on the field, or the right things on the field. And I never really did figure out this deck. Let's start going through the news fairly quickly today, since we started late, and since I do have other stuff I need to focus on. Tooling apparently is still a problem for studios building live service games, while numerous tech vendors have clearly identified the need among developers for accessible, usable, and affordable tools. Progress has been incremental at best. Which, to that headline, I might retort, and I think I will, don't make a live service game then. It does seem very kind of headstrong to say we're struggling to find tools that would make it easier / cheaper / faster to make live service games. Whereas the better solution, or the answer there, in my mind, is don't make live service games, and then you don't need those tools. Just make a good standard multiplayer game or single player game, and get rid of the live service specific elements, and then you won't need to struggle to find tools to add those live service elements. Of course, if they don't add the live service elements, then they can't try and rip you off. Speaking of live service games, yes, I'm still playing my favorite anime waifu gacha game, Destiny Child. It's still going. Every month is a new event, one of 2 or 3 different types of events, to which they give some new story every month. Although I've been losing interest in the story. I feel like it's going in a very different direction, and last month's story, they introduced the player as a completely different character from the protagonist of the story, and paid not that much attention to the protagonist of the story. And then this month, they've told a whole story that is not really focused on the main protagonist again. Which, yeah, overall, that just doesn't quite feel good. It does seem to me like they are losing interest themselves in the main protagonist. See if this works. Video Games Chronicle has an article here that says poorly redacted Sony docs reveal Last of Us and Horizon sequels cost $200 million plus. The scale of modern Sony interactive entertainment game budgets accidentally laid bare by court documents. Which, this is exactly what I was talking about. I think it was last time I streamed. in that it was worth potentially millions of dollars to Microsoft for them to be able to be in this court case and then poorly redact and lay down a scale of what things cost for Sony and Nintendo, and what the console shares really were. What I was talking about specifically, in all fairness, not to just toot my own horn too much, was them talking about the shares when they were saying that the Xbox Series of consoles only had somewhere around 20% of the market share, and then Sony had a redacted amount and Nintendo had a redacted amount. Well, you can infer quite a bit from the sentence structure there, as far as Sony being the bigger redacted amount, and that the range of what that redacted amount could be is not 0 to 100%, but it would be somewhere between like 21% and probably 80%. And inherently, this is just going to keep going on and on, in the sense that that little bits of information here and there are going to come out, and this is why you never really want to go to a public Freedom of Information Act type hearing where information will be somewhat made public and all the secrets, corporate secrets, will be laid bare. Now, inherently, since this is including Microsoft, unless Microsoft is just willing to lay bare all of its secrets, Microsoft is the one likely to suffer the most as far as information coming out, but they can definitely take Nintendo and Sony down with them, and it's not a terrible idea, considering how Microsoft has never really succeeded in the console world. If all of a sudden this created some kind of sentiment where people were not interested in consoles at all, Microsoft benefits fairly well from that idea. They could still sell Game Pass and PC games, and on the other hand, Microsoft, Sony would not be able to make PCs or a PC operating system to compete, and Nintendo definitely wouldn't be able to make a PC or PC operating system to compete. You'd have to see something closer to all of a sudden MacBooks trying to become a thing, like Mac gaming be a thing with Nintendo and Sony exclusives showing up on MacBooks. Do want to synchro summon if we can. Although I'm not sure that was really a synchro summon. The full tweet here is from someone called Tom Warren that said Sony did a great job on document redactions ... not. So, revealed in the documents as Horizon Forbidden West cost came some $212 million to make and was worked on by around 300 people for 5 years, which, okay. Does that mean that every single person there got $1 million over 5 years? Probably not. Almost certainly, but $1 million would be everybody averaging about $200,000, which even that seems a little unlikely, but then you could definitely balance out some of the 300 people that worked on it being QA people being paid minimum wage, and then there being some people that were getting $1 million every year at the higher upper management level. Weirdly can't synchro summon between these two. And I'll take a victory because the connection failed. Sure, why not? We can... We're not really likely to get all the way up here, but just getting a couple more legacy packs is not terrible as far as an idea. The story continues. Last of Us Part 2 cost some $220 million to make and was worked on by around 200 people for 5 years, which that shows that people who worked on Horizon Forbidden West were considerably, on average, underpaid. Wait, no. Yeah. People who worked on Horizon Forbidden West were considerably paid less than people on average who worked on Last of Us Part 2. It's almost exactly the same amount of money, but with 100 less employees at Last of Us Part 2. Which, if anything, the difference there could be, on average, $20,000 difference for people doing basically the exact same work. Like Last of Us Part 2, Horizon Forbidden West, it's basically the exact same kind of games from the being funded by the exact same publisher. They're both AAA games. One company doesn't really deserve to be paid more, in my opinion, just because Last of Us Part 1 sold really well. Because if you start to make the argument that companies should be paid more based on previous successes, then you'll never have any experimentation. And let's face it, a lot of game developers don't have any decision making opportunity as far as what they're working on. Sony is notoriously in that line where Sony, as the publisher, approves what they are going to work on. Making a piece of art, it's very difficult to quantify what an artist should be paid for making a piece of art. And yes, artists usually would be paid more if they are more popular, but it really shouldn't be that way. It really should be more of a case of all video game creators getting paid a standard kind of unionized wage, or getting a grant to make something that they truly desire to make, a commission of some sort. Or, you know, you fix the problem with artists getting paid very easily with universal basic income. Let's see. The story continues. It was already known that the modern AAA games cost over $100 million to create, but this is the first time the full scale of SIE's budget has been revealed. It's likely these figures don't include non-development costs such as marketing, so potentially $400 to $500 million spent on a game before it even makes its first sale. Layden referred to a common theory that development costs had doubled with every new console generation and claimed that the last generation games had reached between $80 million and $150 million for most AAA games. The problem with this model is it's just not sustainable. I don't think that in the next generation you can take these numbers and multiply them by 2 and think you can grow. Which certainly that would explain why there is just very heavy push to acquiring companies, is that you're trying to increase your profits by taking more margin off of a larger amount of sales instead of trying to make more profit off of single standalone games. Of course, if that logic was to be followed all the way through, then there should just be a massive amount of single A and indie games that are coming out from that should be coming out from Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo. And maybe Nintendo's a little bit in that corner, but Sony has done really nothing to bring out single A or indie games, and Microsoft really hasn't been focusing on that lately. It is probably going to be the case that almost all the news we have going forward for the next few weeks is going to be around this FTC court case. Activision's Bobby Kotick says he made, quote, a bad decision by not bringing Call of Duty to the Switch. I didn't think it was going to be widely successful, is the quote. I assume this also was in the trial that this came out. Yeah, there's just going to be a ton of quote mining around this. YouTube decided to suggest to me a video of showing somebody installing a mod to the Nintendo Switch OLED model, and boy, was that a hassle. In the sense that it was just a very, very difficult looking procedure to take apart the OLED model and attach wires in several different places and solder them to an extra chip that was effectively taking over control of the Nintendo Switch chip and launching something before. So it's like a physical hardware of a bootloader virus type software, where I assume the chip is designed to let you have digital copies of games instead of having to have the Switch chips actually in there. And almost certainly it lets you launch homebrew and run ROMs and things like that. But yeah, it was, the process I saw made it seem very, very unwise to go that route. If it was a simple software thing, hacking a Nintendo Switch makes a lot of sense. But if you have to literally put a flexible PCB under the RAM module and then wire 5 different points to an extra chip and add an extra chip, and you have to peel back the wireless RF shielding on the RAM and the CPU, that's just way too much. And the fact that you have to do that much really shows that the Switch is fairly locked down now, the OLED model is. This is an intriguing story from Video Games Chronicle. Nearly an hour of unseen Nintendo Space World 2000 footage has been remastered. The footage includes the GameCube reveal, and the Mario 128 demo. Mario 128, I don't believe it ever actually came out as anything. But it is very intriguing, certainly, to have these earlier presentations that, at best, here, we can show. Here, this is like VHS or beta footage. Very shaky camera being recorded, probably just for Nintendo's own personal use. It was never really designed to be shown, even at an era. Yeah, Mario 128 is just a bunch of Marios spinning around a block. They're showing off Luigi's Mansion and several other games that did come out. Now, notably, it wouldn't have been the first time that Nintendo may have put out advertisements in a VHS format, though. They definitely did that for the Nintendo 64, where they give you a short, like 15-minute VHS as an advertisement to play in your VHS player that you would have had at that point. So yeah, this footage potentially could have been cut and used. It's also kind of interesting that they're going with a kind of more Chinese way of displaying things, that this was Nintendo style at the time. You have these Japanese ladies in black leather showing off the GameCube, looking fairly militant. There was another one where they literally had like 3DSs. There's some Japanese guys also in the black leather on the sides. But yeah, even though these are bright, colorful lunchboxes, they're trying to balance this and say this is more hardcore and for older kids. You see how terrible and not locked down the camera is. Yeah, there was another time they had ladies like chained to 3DSs to show it off to, I think it was Giant Bomb told that story. Miyamoto in this footage also looks very young. This is a lot of footage though, like 51 minutes. So here's Mario 128 being shown off. If anything, it kind of feels like it's almost a early Fortnite concept or aggro.io concept. But you can see there's not a lot here. It's just boxes and Marios. And there was absolutely no way you were going to have 128 players actually talking to each other or playing with each other in the game. So they had made a Mario 64, and they wanted to push this general idea that the GameCube was 128-bit something. Although, what would have actually been 128 bits in the GameCube, I would have to question. It wouldn't be much of anything. But the GameCube, while it did have a network connector, and even the Nintendo 64 had the thoughts of a network connector, there was no internet structure at the time that the GameCube came out that you would have ever had the capability of even 2 or 3 people playing at the same time. Let alone 128 characters. And inevitably, they eventually gave up on Mario 128 and instead made, I would say, Mario Galaxy would have been the next Mario game. I mostly am just trying to synchro summon here. This demo for Mario 128 goes on for a very long time. The next game they're showing off is a Pokemon, looks like music game, but it might just be Pokemon Stadium. I feel like there was a Pokemon music game that came out, but it certainly wasn't very popular. And then they're back to Mario 128. They really didn't have a lot to show. The GameCube made some hard choices, certainly, when it came out, and I think it's very beneficial to point that out and say that maybe the next Nintendo console would also be somewhat similar to that. Here's Shigeru Miyamoto looking rather young by today's standards. See, tech demos for the likes of Wave Race, Metroid, I guess maybe that would have been Metroid Prime, and Legend of Zelda. I guess that might be Skyward Sword. Footage of Luigi's Mansion, Star Wars, Meowth's Party, and a brief glimpse at Perfect Dark and Banjo-Kazooie, neither of which would have ultimately been released on the consoles. Now, also I would say, if this footage has been remastered, it's not been remastered particularly well. But there's only so much you can do before you're just throwing AI remastering in it and making pixels up that didn't exist on the original footage. But yeah, to get back to my thought there, the next Nintendo Switch, next Nintendo consoles, which is probably not going to be a Switch 2, would very well potentially have to make some of the big decisions that the GameCube did. The GameCube took Nintendo away from cartridges. There was not a single disc-based device that was released before the GameCube to actually use discs. There was going to be a Nintendo 64 disc drive. I don't think that came out in Japan, and I know it didn't come out in the West. They made a significant shift away in the GameCube from the weird three-handle control scheme of the Nintendo 64 with the one analog stick and Z trigger and then 4 C buttons, if not maybe 5 C buttons to move the camera, and then one A and B button. They moved to a much closer to what a modern controller would look like on the GameCube. Let me see if I can possibly bring up a picture of what the controller looked like. Okay. So, here you can see it hanging here. they got rid of the third handle. They added the C stick down here, making it an analog stick, and then they have a left analog stick here instead of just a D-pad on the Nintendo 64. They also have a D-pad here. They have a left bump and right bump. I don't think there was a bump and a trigger on GameCube controls, but there might have been. But you are 85% there to what a modern controller looks like. The only big difference is you have an A here and an X and a Y here and a B here. So the buttons are still kind of awkwardly shaped. And you only have a pause button, you don't have like a share or menu button. And yeah, I think there was vibration in it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was only limited vibration in the controller. I think, yeah, there was definitely vibrations in them by default built in too. It's important to also point out here that the Nintendo 64 controller was designed to be this controller you took with you to other people's houses. So the slot, the expansion slot in the back, either gave you a vibration feature or a memory feature, but not both. But the GameCube has put the memory features here with 2 memory slots, and the vibration feature is just built in. Notably, it is important to point out that all of these hard choices they made weren't particularly well received amongst Nintendo fans at the time. Drastically changing the controller again, and making it potentially feel a little bit too much like a Sega controller or a PlayStation 1 controller was not super well received. The fact that you're dropping cartridges, so you're having to buy discs now, and the discs are just as expensive. There never was any real backward compatibility, but there was always a small hope that you could potentially put at least a Game Boy game in a Super Game Boy adapter in the Super NES. Although, notably, there wasn't really something like that for the Nintendo 64. And the GameCube actually did come out with an adapter where you could connect the Game Boy Advanced, I believe it was, to the second player slot of the GameCube, although very few games engaged with that. I think it's important to point out also kind of the craziness of what a business presentation was for Nintendo. Here you see in the background Japanese businessman with a suitcase, Japanese businessmen with suitcases, and yet the presentation has ladies in black leather just to keep the businessmen's attention, I suppose. It is weird, to say the least. But yeah, that's really a blast from the past. But notably, I'm not really having a lot of nostalgia around GameCube games in any way. By just seeing the GameCube console. It would be a very different experience if you had if you tried to convince me to potentially have some nostalgia for GameCube games. And if I was going to have nostalgia for GameCube games, I would just emulate them or want a remastered version of it. I wanted to mention this since we started the month with the Pride Month and video game companies being mostly quiet on Twitter, and just not really that active on Twitter anymore. Anyways, I would say Crystal Dynamics here seems like they have decided to go the furthest, in that they have a charity live stream extravaganza going on here with what I would have to say is a lady in drag who is also cosplaying, which at that point it's kind of two different things on top of each other. And I don't know what character she's really supposed to be cosplaying there, but they definitely seem to be putting their money where their mouth is as far as having a real stream and really committing to it a little bit more than most of the other companies. They're willing to put people's names and faces out there. I don't know if that inherently means these are LGBTQ plus people, or if these are just the people doing the live stream. Which I guess at a certain level it may not matter. Okay. Let's activate this ability and see what happens. But yeah. In comparison, you just have like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands here with a bunch of rainbows and emojis, which maybe this is for Pride, maybe it isn't. And the main reason why I even was brought to my attention that Tiny Tina's Wonderlands here is that 2K Games retweeted a new shift code, which it feels like it's been a while on the shift code. Alright, 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Hopefully no more distractions, but yeah, who knows. And yeah, we'll just keep on playing, but this is probably going to be the last one or two games, and I've probably synchro summoned enough to go up at least one letter in the one level in the rewards, and that's probably as much as I can hope for. So yeah, anyways, with Twitter getting rid of its API or increasing the fees to a massive amount to run APIs, I have not really been seeing any of these shift codes, which, in fairness, I guess they have been happening, not with any frequency like they used to be happening with, though. It used to be a major thing where you'd see at least one shift code a week. Now it definitely seems like you're getting one every couple of weeks, which is less for sure. Of course, then again, Borderlands is also, it can't be super popular forever, and really hasn't been super popular since probably Borderlands 2. Moving on to the next story, Video Games Chronicle says that Red Dead Redemption has been raided in Korea. A potential remaster of the 13-year-old game was reportedly in development at one point. Now, notably, this is kind of the same problem as Nintendo has with Luigi's Mansion, in that they're remastering Luigi's Mansion New Moon, which is a sort of remaster, sort of sequel to 3DS version of Luigi's Mansion, which seems to kind of draw a line in the sand and say they never would go back and remaster the original Luigi's Mansion. So you have this weird situation that if you were a huge Luigi's Mansion fan, you would have played Luigi's Mansion 3, then potentially this New Moon remaster, or played the eShop version of Luigi's Mansion that isn't remastered, and now you're going to play New Moon and just play everything out of order. Same thing, Red Dead Redemption 1 was the thing people really wanted to see, particularly on PC, and has never been released to port or ported to PC. And so when they made Red Dead Redemption 2, then that created a weird situation for PC gamers. Although that doesn't inherently mean Red Dead Redemption 1, even if it is a PC port, that it will actually be a good PC port. And this still, in this case, skips over Red Dead Revolver, the first game in the series, I believe. So they still are very much going out of order. This might speak to yet another attempt of Rockstar to potentially make some money outside of GTA Online through porting and re-releases, which is what they should do, but they also have to be kind of good. 1500 or less attack. So if you summon this one first, that would have potentially let me summon this. But I couldn't because I was negated, so I can still summon that. We have a Gamatsu story here of a Cinerasoma studio, Somnia Scenaris Somnia studio announcing a 1980s Japan horror adventure game called Hollow Cocoon for PC. And you can see here you have a very, very skinny, long black-haired Japanese lady monster with tattoos or wings growing out of her back, probably tattoos. Which, yeah, that catches the eye at least a little bit. 24. See if this effect does anything. Now, as far as what the game actually is, we seem to have just a few screenshots here to look at. Mostly just showing environmentals and probably some puzzles. In a lot of ways, it looks very much like a standard asset flip horror game. Just looking at the screenshots, you do have a slight difference here in that there's probably slightly less assets that you can flip into a 1980s Japan, and yeah, you can really see how Japan is severely changing very quickly in the 80s from its 200, 300-year-old style buildings to UFO coin games here that you can play with. The actual horror aspects is just someone with a flashlight, and here you can see a rundown, dirty Japanese pagoda style. I don't know if that's pagoda style or not. Just traditional Japanese building. So there is this odd mix of approaching modern technology versus old architecture. That was labeled as alpha gameplay footage, though. It's not really a lot there. It's promising multiple endings, difficulty selection, autosave, and motion sickness reduction. Which, honestly, like a lot of games, it seems to me like the most intriguing part of this is just the thumbnail, and they at the moment don't have anything more done. Video Games Critical has an article here. Nintendo's next console, shareholders ask about backwards compatibility and more. The company wants Nintendo accounts to help customers smoothly transition to its next console. Which, okay. Nintendo accounts already exist, so unless they are promoting the idea that you need to make a different kind of a Nintendo account as far as a profile, and yeah, I don't know what they really are needing there extra. It does imply to me that Nintendo accounts in their minds may move save files over and may move downloaded files over, so things you bought on the eShop would be transferable in some way to the new console. I don't know if I really believe that the cartridges that go in this next Nintendo console are going to be the same as Switch cartridges. or that any of those games are going to be backwards compatible. Let's see if they answered any of the questions. Nintendo 3DS and Wii U games purchased through the Nintendo eShop can't be transferred to Switch. One shareholder suggested it would be disheartening if this was also the case for the Nintendo's next console. So basically all we're going to get is what the shareholders in Japan feel, which on a certain level I kind of put more faith in Japanese shareholders than I do in Western shareholders, because I wouldn't be surprised if a significant number of people who do own shares in Japan, Nintendo of Japan, actually are video gamers and fans of Nintendo, whereas Nintendo of America's shareholders, assuming that was a public company, which I don't believe it is, it's probably a whole subsidiary of Nintendo of Japan. But if it was a public company, almost certainly the vast majority of people who are shareholders in Nintendo of America would just be stockbrokers and people trying to make money and profit over everything else. Let's see. The response that they got closest it can be translated to, I guess, is we are always considering various things about the specifications of future hardware, but at this stage I would like to refrain from making any specific comments about future hardware, so basically no comment. As for the sales style of Nintendo Switch software, there are different types like physical package software, bought in stores, download versions of package software, and download only software, which it's interesting you even bother to make a difference there to say the download version of a package software is different than download only software. Many of our customers have been playing the Nintendo Switch with download software or download only software, and compared to previous game consoles, the ratio of digital sales has been increasing, which is true for all consoles. As a company, we would like to continue to proposing unique gameplay through dedicated game consoles that integrate hardware and software in the future, so please look forward to that. That basically says nothing other than there will be hardware and there will be software. Asked if the company could share any specific strategies for moving from Switch to the next console, Furukawa told shareholders the company wants to utilize Nintendo accounts to make the transition process a smooth one for customers. And if that's the only quote they can get before they decide to throw in a picture of Mario, that really goes to show how tight-lipped he was at the shareholders meeting. But at a certain level, there should probably be a little bit more accountability to answer questions instead of just dancing around the answers or paying lip service to people asking questions. It comes off a lot more like one of those city hall meetings where you just have people, a lot of crazy people often, asking questions of City Hall, and the politicians either not responding at all or just saying thank you for your comments and just not really paying attention at all. Or politicians being asked questions from voters or even reporters and them just saying no comment. Like, there should be more votes of no confidence around these people who are willing to basically say nothing. And I suppose as a shareholder you could try and vote out the president, but I doubt the Japanese ever would do that. Whereas it's a lot harder to recall a politician if they are refusing to answer questions or communicate with voters in any way. In fact, it's pretty standard for politicians to ignore the people that voted them in favor of only taking meetings and listening to lobbyists and big business. I doubt I'm gonna win here, but we are getting synchro summons. What does this red rain do? I think this is going to give me 6,000 life points back. Yeah, it did. Wow. I'm going to run out of time here, so I'm just going to play this spell so it stops prompting me on that. And special summon here. And I totally need to know what these synchro summon things. I would totally need to know the special abilities of each of these cards to have any way to really play a strategy with these cards. But it doesn't really matter. Koei Tecmo has this blue reflection second light Ryza style costume for AO, and Fatal Frame Maiden in Black Water Yori exclusive costume Ryza outfit as far as a crossover. And this is what caught my attention, even though they kind of have some more things they've retweeted since then, and they mostly are trying to promote Wulong Fallen Dynasty. Let's see. I guess Furukawa, according to Video Games Chronicle, also wants to avoid scalping with its next console. They said the company will aim to avoid resellers by making as many consoles as possible. It is a different situation now, though, certainly to say that, because of the part shortage and just a reevaluation of what is really feasible as far as making hardware. So yeah, I definitely would not put my bets that any new console coming out in the next few years is going to have an overabundance of items on the shelf. Plus, the economy is just not that good, and I don't expect it to get that much better in the next couple of years. So you have this situation where there's definitely less people that would be able to afford a new console. Unless Nintendo goes in a very different direction. Like, Nintendo probably could make as many consoles as it wants to. Interesting. I won there. I don't wonder why he surrendered. Seemed like he was going to win no matter what. And so where we are at here is 7,400. We could go, it would take another victory and 2 losses to get these 2, then 2 more victories to get here, then 2 more victories to get here, and 2 more victories to get there. Yeah, I guess if Nintendo came out with something really cheap, something that was $60 or $70, and I have no idea what that thing would be, if you're going to call that your next console. But yeah, if all of a sudden it was some kind of streaming device like a Firefly, what is it? Fire Stick, Amazon Fire Stick? Yeah. If you did something like that, then maybe you could come out with a streaming stick that was really cheap. Then Amazon account, Nintendo accounts would be really necessary. Yeah. If I synchro summoned one more time, I'd get 40 gold, 40 gems. So let's play one more game on that aspect. We've got 3 hours left to play anyways. Just one more game. But yeah, unless it was a Amazon Fire Stick that just streamed completely and it came with one very cheap Joy-Con like controller that was wireless only, and then you had to buy a second controller to play potentially with a 2 Joy-Con style of gameplay. That's about the only way I could imagine you could have enough for everybody and avoid scalpers. Meanwhile, I don't think any company, Nintendo or otherwise, really cares about scalpers that much. They just don't want people to be so upset with scalpers that they don't ever buy the console because of it. Because at the end of the day, scalping makes for a good positive story of how popular your console is, and you're still getting the retail price you're selling the consoles on, and you're potentially screwing over scalpers if they can't offload consoles at a profit. I almost feel like I should surrender after I synchro summon, but I don't think it's the wisest move to do that. Because it may not count it. I have no idea what should be summoning or drawing. Doesn't seem like it matters. Well, I guess maybe it does matter somewhat. Odds of this being a 50 or 0 is basically none. So we'll do a tiny 100 damage. Nothing else to do. Video Games Chronicle has an article. PlayStation's boss claims that publishers, quote, unanimously dislike Xbox Game Pass. Jim Ryan claims that the game firm believes Microsoft's subscription service is, quote, value destructive, in the sense that it destroys the value of games and just turns it into this generic blob. it's an interesting thought, certainly, to say that if you were to look at like the Netflix system, which would be the closest comparison I can think of, is Stranger Things less valuable because it is part of that subscription service than if Stranger Things was instead an HBO TV series? That, nope, that's not even a good comparison because HBO is also a subscription service. It would have to be, is Stranger Things less valuable because it's on Netflix compared to it being on an on-demand streaming service where you pay for each episode, or in theaters as a movie? Or a series of movies, I guess, would be the kind of idea. Particularly that latest season of Stranger Things, where almost every episode is as long as a movie. Value destructive, I think, is the wrong way to phrase it. I think maybe Xbox Game Pass gets rid of some of the BS around video games, particularly B-tier games and just things that aren't the best as far as S-tier games as far as quality. If we were to go like S-tier, A-tier, B-tier, C-tier, D-tier, F-tier, just speaking from that idea. If Xbox really is value destructive and this isn't just more nonsense from Jim Ryan, then why would Microsoft be so willing to put Psychonauts 2, the Minecraft Legends game, Grounded, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and Age of Empires, I believe this is. I think each of these are major first-party titles on Xbox Game Pass day one. Probably on day one they were released. So why commit your own games to that if it is so value destructive? And the bigger question is, even if this was true, I think Microsoft deserves a pat on the back for how well they have managed to get companies to come out and say the exact opposite. Because I definitely have heard small indie companies say that Xbox Game Pass was great for their game, and they had way more people play their game once it entered Xbox Game Pass territory than who would have played it otherwise if they had just tried to sell it. Some of these games definitely were games that were individual PC games that got ported to Xbox and Game Pass, and then they got way more attention because of it. It's a curation feature that I think works very well. And yeah, it gets around the BS of trying to sell everything for now $70, which, let's face it, that's the value they're talking about there, is that Jim Ryan is claiming that every single game should be $70 regardless of length or quality or just the expectations it should try to set. There's another story around Minecraft that's worth mentioning too, in that Mojang has officially pulled itself away from Reddit. That they just don't want anything to do with Reddit, so r/Minecraft probably will still exist, but I don't think that they are keeping that Mojang is going to have anything to do with Reddit going forward, and that's one big loss. But overall, I think we can say that the protests failed pretty miserably because they set a timer on it in the first place. To say that there would be a one-day protest or a two-day protest was a mistake. It should have been an indefinite protest with background plans that weren't announced to potentially delete or destroy the value of Reddits. Now, at a certain point, you might create a scenario where people remember Reddit going down in flames because the moderators all decided to drag Reddit down into flames. But fair enough, at a certain point, too. Like, there's a real problem, it feels like, now that Reddit has managed to whip all of its free unpaid moderators into line with just the threat of taking away their pathetic power over subreddits, to the point where Reddit is getting the message they can do anything they want, and people will still go to Reddit and still use Reddit, and it will just become this potentially slightly censored version of what Reddit once was, in that everything will fall in line, everything will have this facade of still working like it used to, but there'll be a little bit of censorship here if anybody mentions the protest or anybody mentions the API changes, and overall the product will just get worse and worse over a very slow period of time, instead of it potentially dying in a fast period of time, which would have forced more users potentially to go somewhere different. Although their main problem always was that there was just not a good competitor to Reddit. And there's too many people that want to go to Reddit just for the things that they want to go to. In particular, if I'm going to, like, an adult subreddit to look at people posting themselves nude, for instance, so a porn subreddit, I probably don't care too much about the protest, and I just want to see pictures of porn. So you're not really getting satisfied there. If I'm going to a programming subreddit and want to talk about a program or get some help with programming or something like that, I don't care about the protest. Whatever reason you're actually going to as an end user of Reddit is the reason you're going there, and the protests aren't a big enough deal to justify shutting down the entire forums, and there's no other way to really protest effectively. It also seems, according to Google, that when Reddit did shut down in protest, you had a significant drop in quality of search results all of a sudden, because a bunch of other websites who are just search engine optimization spammed websites jumped to the first few clicks on a Google search. Which, that's a problem in itself, that Reddit potentially is taking up a major percentage of the internet as far as the main forum in which you can find things. And Discord, I don't think really addresses that. I don't think there's a way to have your Discord indexed or anything like that, so that it would show up in a Google search when somebody has a problem with, like, a piece of programming or a piece of hardware. So if we all went to this federated concept, it also has to have a way of being searchable if you so choose, and it has a way to be kind of undeletable. Well, it seems like Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't want to work anymore, which is fine. We're done anyways. Tyler McVickerson and Edmund McMillan, who both worked on The Binding of Isaac, apparently are streaming and working on The Binding of Isaac once again. So, seems to me like there's maybe some new content coming from them, or at least some bug fixing. Although I guess in a certain level, the bug fixing and all of that probably shouldn't be handled by them, because they have a whole other company that's in charge of Binding of Isaac now. Team Nicholas, I believe is the name of that. So if they're going to work on anything, they should be working on new content. Speaking of working on new content, Unity has rolled out some artificial intelligence tools in a marketplace for game developers. Unity's AI tools include a content creation tool called Unity Muse and a runtime interface engine called Unity Synthesis, which this definitely feels like this is just another desperate attempt / nail in the coffin of Unity, and that they are now encouraging people who use their software, to use AI, which is going to cause some weirdness, almost certainly. There's also still no way, like, that you could use something that uses AI and then end up being able to own the copyright of that thing created. So yeah, because the court cases have already clearly said you can only own the copyright if a human creates something, and at a certain point we're already stretching the definition of what a person is, because we give personhood to corporations. So we can say a corporation created something, but there still needs to be a human hand behind it fully. At least that's how the court systems and decisions have gone so far. Apparently, Harry Potter here. Harry Potter Magic Awakened is now available. What is it available on, though? You have a different art style. If anything, I think the Harry Potter series has gone in a lot of different directions with a lot of different animations. Apparently you can explore and challenge others, but this is a card game. So, if anything, it seems like it's a weirdly complicated card game. Because it seems to me like you've got 4 or 5 different wizards fighting 4 or 5 different enemies. So, do you play a card and then it just puts them in a lane, or do they just auto attack no matter what? I'm not sure. Pre-registration rewards we probably missed. Discord community being promoted. This is, I think, for Warner Brothers. Seasonal cards, social club, dance club, seasonal updates. There is definitely a danger here that the card game may not be quite polished enough, or that the card game could be a little too kid friendly. Now I am noticing still you have a decent number of people. Oh, sorry, this is still blurred. Now this is interesting. It looks pitch black in my preview, but there's clearly a background pattern on this page. But yeah, YouTube, Facebook's still being used, even though Facebook, most people would say, is dead, as particularly for advertising a product. Twitter, Instagram, and Discord. Yeah. There's not been a replacement for Facebook. There's not been a replacement for Twitter. There's not been a replacement for Instagram. Tumblr is the only one that really has managed to completely fail as a social site to promote your product on. Yep, this is Warner Brothers and NetEase and maybe Zen Studios. Portakey Games. Seems like a lot. While we do have links to different things here, there's weirdly not a link to just where you would download this. So, do you have to play it on a website? Game overview gallery. Visit HarryPotterMagicAwakened.com. Wasn't that the website we were already on? Maybe not. Okay. So there is a PC download, there's a Google Play, and there's an App Store version. I like this art style. I don't know if it particularly falls in line with what people think of when they think of Harry Potter, but it doesn't look terrible. Harry Potter, I guess, is a fairly new concept. It was somewhat solidified with the movies, but they're, I think, going to try. Yeah, I think my autoblur might be enabled already. Whoops. They may very well try to redo the Harry Potter movies. It wouldn't be terrible if they made an animated series that looked like this around the Harry Potter books first, and then they tried to do live action again, just as a way of doing a TikTok concept. But yeah, here you have Harry Potter, and they're not even really focusing on it. Here we have Hermione, and I wouldn't have immediately assumed that was her. And then I don't even know who Newt is. And then Severus Snape looks about right, but Bellatrix Lestrange looks very different. Yeah, noticeably Harry Potter is not the main protagonist. It seems. Seems like Hermione is. A lot of concept art here. If anything, this feels like Harry Potter's already grown up, and that this is set in the events after the books. Which, okay, that might make some sense too. Although then would Harry Potter still be around, and would Severus Snape still be around at that point? And I don't know who this girl is and who this girl is, so it definitely feels like there is definitely a female focus. Alright, well, I will have to download this or see if it's on Steam. You would think there would be a link if it was on Steam, and see if there's something there that would be interesting enough to get away from playing Yu-Gi-Oh, which they're arguably, that's going to be a somewhat hard sell. Yeah, there is a lot of controversy still around the author of Harry Potter, and she's just always coming up and causing more controversy. So I don't know if I really want to jump into playing a Harry Potter game. I also, once again, with Warner Brothers being involved, question if the game wouldn't be abandoned fairly quickly. It is noteworthy also that not the latest Harry Potter game, but the one before that was a mobile game with a lot of microtransactions and was very poorly received, even though there was a lot of hype around it. There's considerably less hype around this game since I haven't even heard of it before, and yet there is still that danger. I'm drinking a milkshake at the moment. It's been melting for 2 hours, which that's almost certainly the wrong thing to be drinking while talking, because that's gonna just burn my throat with the whipped cream. I need to drink water. We have a Gematsu article here that says Microsoft considered Bungie and Sega for future acquisitions. Which, yeah, I imagine the... Let's get the music playing in the background so we don't sit in total silence. I imagine every time we hear this, it's either dirty laundry Microsoft didn't want to air, or this is just Microsoft admitting that both Bungie and Sega acquisition talks fell through. Now, if Microsoft, I guess, doesn't own Bungie, Bungie makes Destiny. Had they managed to acquire Destiny, that would have done them very well to particularly force Bungie back to working on a work on the next Halo game, since they worked on the original Halo game. I need to go in on the menu of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or it's gonna start loading in the screensaver on the main screen. If Microsoft had acquired Sega, I probably would have done well for Microsoft and Sega in particular. Although you acquire Bungie to make sure Halo Infinite is a much better game than it was and is. You acquire Sega because you want Sonic and you want a foothold into Japan, which I don't know if that really is going to get you much of a foothold in Japan. If Microsoft could acquire the Japanese company Sega, which would be hard to do, they could probably acquire Sega of America pretty easily, but to acquire Sega of Japan would be probably disallowed by the Japanese government, since Sega is basically a national treasure to Japan, more than Sony even. But had they acquired them, I wouldn't be super surprised if the Japanese just rejected Sega completely at that point, and they just go, oh, this is a great excuse now to never play another terrible Sonic game, because I don't think the Japanese people are any happier with the bad Sonic games that have been released in the past than the Western players are. They probably are just begrudgingly supporting Sega. On top of that, Sega might have been a good deal after the COVID pandemic and them shutting down all of their arcades, but they potentially may have recouped from that somewhat, and so they may not really be that good of a deal as far as an acquisition now. Although it is totally possible they may just come back and try and acquire Bungie and Sega. The subheadline here says, Microsoft wanted to use the clout provided by Sega and Bungie's respective names to drive players around the world to join Xbox Game Pass. Which, that's fairly obvious. That's what Microsoft has been pushing people to, is joining Xbox Game Pass over and over again. That's been their main single focus. Here we have a Video Games Chronicle article saying Microsoft CEO claimed he'd, quote, love to get rid of console exclusives entirely, end quote. The second quote here is, I have no love for that world, end quote, says Satya Nadella, which he doesn't have a way of really doing that other than to potentially destroy consoles entirely. Yeah, my auto blur is on, so I'm just gonna have to remember to de-blur each time. Auto blur not supposed to activate so early. I thought I had programmed it right, but obviously in running the macro I must have triggered it. And let's see, do I have any shortcut key to untrigger it? No. I should make a shortcut key to disable or pause auto blur. Yeah. But yeah, Satya Nadella of Microsoft can't get rid of console exclusives because Nintendo would always want that, and Sony would probably always want that if they destroyed consoles entirely and it was all PC gaming all the time, which is the ideal thing for PC gamers, certainly. Then you get rid of console exclusives because you've gotten rid of consoles. And eventually, that will be the future we hit, no matter what. Like, we'll have Steam Decks that will be x86 or x64 based code, and it will run any other kinds of software, any PC software. And then we'll have laptops and gaming desktops. And it will just be that there is going to be probably a Steam Deck and a couple of competitors that would be more for kids who wouldn't build their PC. And then there would be a wide range of custom PCs you could build for adults if you want to build a PC. And in between that, you might even have one or two good laptops or desktop pre-builts that are pretty standard for gaming. Let's see. The other thing Tyler McVickerson did is he retweeted this custom DLC called The Future that's not made by anybody, as far as I can tell, that would be on Team Nicholas or anything like that. But this is the first time I've seen Edwin McMillan or Tyler McVickerson highlight any Steam Workshop products for the Binding of Isaac Rebirth. This one, called The Future, adds a new floor containing 30 plus characters and room mechanics and a mini map. Particularly chatty individuals. Overall, though, it still really does just look like the same old as far as Binding of Isaac Rebirth, which more of the same in the case of Binding of Isaac Rebirth is not a bad thing. This is rated 5 stars out of 447 reviews. And if this is what the creators of Binding of Isaac Rebirth, or the creators of Binding of Isaac at least, are playing and looking at, then you know where their head is at if they're going to actually make more Binding of Isaac content, which they're inevitably forced to make more Binding of Isaac content because it's the main thing that sells for both Edmund McMillan and Tyler McVickerson. I hope I'm pronouncing their names right. Here we have a Video Games Chronicle article saying it looks like the IO Interactive's fantasy RPG is an Xbox exclusive. Internal documents list Project Dragon as a Xbox console exclusive in addition to PC, which, okay. This is more coming from the FTC versus Microsoft trial. Let's see. A Unity exec says the AI tools are, quote, disruptive for video game industry. Unity President Mark Whitten explains why the company thinks every pixel of a game will one day be touched by AI. Which, you know, I do feel like there is potentially, in the case of a Unity asset store and a Unreal Engine asset store, there might be a way there where you're making an artificial intelligence system, large language model type system, based on things that have either been forced to be opt-in, but not everything off the internet, or things that have opted in to be used. And there is potentially a way that might work there. If all of a sudden Unity is making a ton of base art, and that is the only art that is being sampled by the AI, and it isn't scraping the internet and stealing other people's art, there might be something around that. But the test people have seen there is that you'll have authors search ChatGPT and ask them, write me a short story in the style of Stephen King. Well, the only possible way that ChatGPT would know how to write in the style of Stephen King, if it successfully does that, is if they scanned and stole Stephen King's writing and turned that into a style. And even if they're just stealing his style and aping him, it's a little too close for comfort for most people's opinions. On the other hand, I jokingly posted on my private Facebook, it seems like a lot of people are upset with ChatGPT because they've never realized that human beings also potentially lie and hallucinate and just say whatever they think you want to hear. Because, yeah, decades before ChatGPT was a thing, I remember in my own personal life running into people who lie, and people who just hallucinate things and make things up whole cloth, and people who just tell you what you want to hear. And yeah, that's incredibly frustrating and irritating, but it is a thing that certainly has existed prior to a computer being able to do it, or being so poorly programmed that it does that. And I don't know how you would really program an AI tool like ChatGPT, whereas some of these AI tools for art are slightly different. But I don't know how you program any of them for any level of honesty or certainty or anything like that. I think you probably would spend a massive amount of more research necessary to be done to get a AI to even just admit that 1 + 1 = 2 consistently, because there is no real authority for fact, and there is no real source for fact. Best case scenario, you'd have ChatGPT scan something like Wikipedia to try to get the facts as close as possible and ignore the rest of the internet, but even that would be fairly bad. Yeah, the auto blur is on. So the auto blur does work in its main function. It just is having trouble as far as the triggering function to turn it on. Shenmue's creator Yu Suzuki's Air Twister is coming to consoles and PC next November, according to Video Games Chronicle. This was, I believe, an Apple TV game originally, or an Apple product originally. It doesn't really look like much, but it's kind of pretty looking. I could see people trying it out, but I doubt people would stick with it for very long. Asterix and Obelix Slapped 'Em All 2 has been announced for all consoles and PC, according to Gamatsu. I don't know why I specifically clicked on this, other than to just potentially point out that Asterix and Obelix still seem to be popular. The Atelier Ryza shipments have topped 2 million sales, 400,000 units shipped since March 17th. And here they have another thank you picture showing off the thighs. Although, at a certain point here, the hype around Atelier Ryza has to kind of die down pretty soon. Yes, it will still sell, but they need to start promoting the next Atelier series, or they're going to get trapped in nostalgia around the Atelier Ryza series, and then potentially have to decide to make fewer Atelier games than they would like to, which they seem to like to make quite a bit of them. Let's see. More Harry Potter Awakened stuff. What's weird about this is that they've clearly been promoting and tweeting this, and this has totally gone over my head. Perhaps a lot of it is because some of these screenshots heavily don't emphasize cards in any way. But yeah, I've totally missed this. almost wonder if this is a game that has been in early access. No, it seems like it's just been people signing up since June 2nd. They had 2 million signups. So they've got people hyped, certainly. Video Games Chronicle has the same story here. Microsoft explored buying Sega, Bungie, and IO Interactive. And then this report of Google experimenting with instant games on YouTube. I don't know if I have anything new to say here on that. There is a weird situation, particularly as a gaming content creator, in that if instant games really worked in a great way, I would be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and then there would be a button that would pop up and push people to start playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel right alongside, or perhaps completely stopping the stream. It would be fine, I guess, if I continue to get the watch time and somebody's watching me in a small screen in the top right corner. It really sucks if all of a sudden my 3-hour streams get turned into 5-minute streams that people are watching, which honestly, if I even got an average of 5 minutes of watch time on my streams, that would be a major improvement. But yeah, as a game player, as a long player, it's going to really hurt me in particular if all of a sudden every video game I play pops up a button where somebody else can just start playing a video game themselves. But I have to say, as a gamer, and I am a gamer first before being a YouTube content creator for sure, it's actually probably a correction of a major problem we've had, in which gamers have increasingly become these groups of people who play less and less games and end up just watching people on YouTube or Twitch play games. That has been a complaint in the past few years as Twitch and streaming became more and more popular, that you had these passive, kind of lazy people who call themselves gamers but really are not playing games themselves, not getting to the endings of games because they're not playing them, not honing their skills as a player either. And I definitely don't think it's good for the video game industry if it becomes this passive form of art where all of a sudden you're seeing other people, professional players potentially, play video games on the primetime TV show of ABC or CBS or Fox or something like that. That would be pretty bad. Even when you get back to like Tech TV and G4, there was never this idea. I think that's in part because they were afraid of being copyright claimed, but there was never really an idea to show actual gamers playing actual games all the way through. At best, you would have comedic skits around cutscenes or just full cinematic cutscenes or trailers shown. If anything, yeah, that the cutscene show on G4 probably was copyright infringement in that it was showing entire cutscenes, but I assume they got permission for each cutscene they picked. But yeah, there was never a point where you saw full players. And esports people are doing a different kind of thing compared to long players. I guess my big hope here is if somebody does click play on a game while I'm streaming. So if I'm playing Lord of the Rings, the adventure card game, and somebody clicks play and then they can start playing it too, my hope is that I would still be a square in a corner and I would still get that watch time, or my audio would play in the background. That actually would work very nicely for me if all of a sudden my audio just played in the background and people listened to me passively while playing a video game. But there's no guarantee that's how this is going to work at all. If anything, it's very likely it's going to be click a button to play some awful mobile game that's really just being advertised, Day of Survival or something, and it will just take you completely out of the viewing experience and the passive experience you've set yourself up for as far as watching YouTube, or semi-passive. YouTube's a little bit more active than watching TV or movies, but just by a little. And then the final Gematsu article I want to talk about for today is that Microsoft also considered acquiring Square Enix for its mobile Game Pass plans, which I would suspect that might still be on the table. Although, in all fairness, I don't think Square Enix would ever have anybody smart enough or capable enough in management to agree to any kind of acquisition. I think they would screw it up one way or the other. And the most recent Final Fantasy game seems to be extremely well received, which is good news to hear. It didn't seem to me like it would have caught my attention or Western people's attention that much, but it has been reviewed very well, at least in the Eastern Famitsu reviews. And I haven't heard any pushback or backlash against the positive reviews from more Final Fantasy fans and Eastern fans. So now they're probably riding high on that and wouldn't consider being acquired. It would have definitely been a different situation if they acquired Square Enix when Square Enix also owned Tomb Raider and Deus Ex companies. But since they spun off those companies and sold those to Embracer Group, you really have now a Square Enix that is almost exclusively focused on Japanese RPGs and mobile games associated to Japanese RPGs. The subheadline here is Microsoft wanted to get its foot in the door with Japan and mobile games, and only Square Enix would have allowed both of those. Which, yeah, we have not seen a mobile Game Pass concept implemented yet. But I bet we will see one eventually, and it probably will be for the better that does come out, because then more competition there is really just fighting against Google Play, because I imagine that Game Pass, mobile Game Pass, would never be allowed on iPhones. But better games on mobile of any sort is a better idea. And yeah, I'm still in this weird situation, certainly as far as cosplaying, that I kind of want to talk about it. Here we have like a Zelda cosplayer. I'm gonna just leave it blurred on that. But if I am gonna talk about cosplaying, I need to talk about it really at the end of the stream, not at the beginning of the streams. We have an interesting Dave the Diver game being promoted here on the front page of Steam. Still waiting until the summer sale kicks in. Also, there is this there is the Amazon Prime Day sale that they're trying to promote. I think this Prime Day I'm going to skip everything. I don't think there's anything I can afford or even want from Amazon unless they offer something that's just a discount off of buying anything. I've got a couple of things in back order, but I've been saying that for years too. Whoops. Really, I'm gonna have to train myself to unblur. Like, I've been saying for years, if Amazon Prime Day just gave you $5 off of buying anything on Amazon, that would be great. But their Prime Day sales instead just end up being advertisements for very weird stuff or very basic stuff, garbage stuff a lot of times. Alright, so let's go through the Video Games Chronicle articles. Switch Online has added 4 more Mega Drive Genesis games. Of that, I don't know if any of these are super important. You have Ghouls and Goblins, not to be confused with Ghost and Goblins, which was technically a sequel, but basically the same game, but slightly different. You have Crusade of Sinti, you have Landstalker, and you have Revenge of Shinobi. And I guess Revenge of Shinobi and Ghouls and Goblins are names I recognize. Xbox had considered acquiring the Banjo-Kazooie devs' new studio. Playtonic Games was part of a list of potential acquisitions written up in 2021. So man, we really are just going to get a headline for every single game, which you could probably just click on the list and yeah. So this was just your list of games, list of wants here, that I'm sure they handed all of these to a legal team, or they probably shot off an email to each of these developer and these publishers and said, hey, would you be interested in discussing having a meeting? And in the meeting you would say, hey, would you be interested in some kind of acquisition face to face? And then if that was the beginning of a discussion, they would probably hand it to the lawyers to figure out if it was the right thing they could do, and maybe at some point they'd even include the accountants to make sure that they should do it. But yeah, Gearbox Software being on this list, basically everybody being on this list. If you asked me to sit down and write down a list of 100 developers, I would have a hard time. I could certainly go to Wikipedia and look it up, but yeah. Inherently, I think this also points out that at that early stage, there was not a special desire to acquire any specific company. It's not a case where they got along very well with, say, Double Fine or the people who work at Double Fine and thought they would be a good fit. This is just straight up old-fashioned, cold calculating business. Xbox would have done well acquiring probably any studio they wanted to acquire. Banjo-Kazooie would have done very nicely on Xbox, still would be beneficial to Microsoft and Xbox if they had some more kid-friendly games. It's kind of a tough sell at the moment to say to a kid they should buy an Xbox Series X because it has all the kids' games or teenager games even. In a lot of ways, it's pretty obvious that the default solution would be to buy a PlayStation 5 instead. PlayStation VR 2 will eventually be compatible with PC, claims the window driver creator, but it won't be soon and may require extra custom-made hardware. So, this hardly sounds like this is going to be official support. This is from the iVRY driver maker, I guess. Yeah, if you're capable and determined enough, I imagine you can make any VR headset work with a PC eventually. But even if it works with a PC, anything that would be a unique or special feature in the PlayStation VR 2 would not likely be compatible with any software on Steam. VR seems like it's pretty much dead as an idea once again, and we'll see it come back, I bet, in another decade with another attempt. Let's see, the first Bandai Namco cross store outside of Japan is coming to London. The store will open in Camden next month and will host 6 separate shops. I assume these are all Bandai Namco themed shops. Let's see. One of these says One Piece. And then the rest of these, I have no idea what they would be selling. But none of it really seems to be particularly focused around the video game aspects of Bandai Namco. Let's see, July's 2023 PlayStation Plus Essential Games have been leaked. And then they were officially announced. So we'll probably get a better list from Komatsu on that. Final Fantasy XVI enjoys a strong 3 million launch, but it can't quite match its predecessor. Which, okay. Yep. Modern Warfare Studio Infinity Ward has established a new Spanish team that will work alongside Call of Duty Warzone mobile developer Digital Legends in Barcelona. We already talked about the hour of unseen Nintendo Space World 2000 footage being quote-unquote remastered. We already talked about Red Dead Redemption being rated in Korea. Call of Duty Warzone Mobile will be released this fall. Activision Bobby Kotick's bad decision on not bringing Call of Duty to the Switch. Let's see. Court docs reveal Microsoft considered buying Final Fantasy publisher Square Enix. We already talked about that. We already talked about the poorly redacted Sony documents. Here we have another story. Sony accidentally reveals confidential Call of Duty player and revenue data. Poorly redacted documents shine a light on the importance of Call of Duty to PlayStation. So, I question if maybe this is intentional, but I don't see if it's really beneficial to Sony to release things like this. And I imagine this is really just a case that thousands upon thousands of documents were submitted to the court, and whoever they paid to redact things did just a poor job. In 2021, Call of Duty players spent on average of 116 hours per year, ? Call of Duty's players spent more than 70% of their time on Call of Duty. Spent on average. I don't understand. Call of Duty's players spending more than 70% of their time on Call of Duty spend an average of 296 hours on the franchise. So if you're spending more than 70% of your total play time on this one game, you're hitting nearly 300 hours. Call of Duty accounted for, it was confirmed that Call of Duty accounted for $1 billion in sales on the PlayStation consoles in 2021. Yeah. So we're getting some real inside baseball, some real numbers here to show that Call of Duty does seem like it is a big deal, which that supports Sony's complaint more than Microsoft, so perhaps them leaking the big numbers is to their benefit in this case. I don't think it's to their benefit to leak the other stuff, though. Microsoft CEO claimed he'd love to get rid of console exclusivity. We already talked about that. Let's see. And then these are kind of old stories, so we'll move around. Good Old Games Summer Sale has been updated with another free game. Ancient Enemy is the 5th of 6 titles being given away, which I guess that means something. Let's see. Apparently Perfect Dark is reportedly 2 to 3 years away and could be released episodically. Being delayed an extremely long time and being released episodically is a bad combination. They've been working on the game since 2018. Is this another thing from the FTC filing the court, or is this coming from a different source? It seems like it's coming from a different source. We don't even really know what Perfect Dark would be, though if it does come out, could be almost anything called Perfect Dark. Meta, aka Facebook, is launching a subscription service for the Quest games, which, if everybody hates subscription services, why is Meta making one? That's another question to ask. Atomic Heart's first expansion has been announced. A new Game Plus update is out now, ahead of the game's Annihilation Instinct DLC in August. Did they possibly fix the infinitely respawning enemies issue? Because that was kind of the main problem, is that you would get into these overworld sections and then infinitely respawning enemies would come and attack you, and there was just no real way to stop them and smell the roses. And it doesn't seem like they probably have. It's a little surprising that there's any new content around Atomic Heart, because I would have kind of not been surprised if they took the money and ran around the hype of that game and then just said, hey, let's take those profits and work on our next game and promise our next game will be better, instead of potentially trying to improve this game, which has a little too many flaws to be fixed, with the kind of bad boss fights and the infinitely spawning enemy sections. They do have the vacuum suck feature to search objects around you and pick up items, and that's certainly an idea that I hope wasn't patented, so we would see other games in the future do that, where you can just vacuum everything around you to pick up items. Although inherently, if you need a vacuum to pick up all the items around you, there's just too many searchable items and too many items to collect in the first place. We already talked about Sega, Bungie, and IO Interactive being potentially acquired by Microsoft, or Microsoft exploring that. A 3D remaster of a cult mobile game, Ridiculous Fishing, headlines July's Apple Arcade's release. I've heard of Ridiculous Fishing. I don't think I've ever actually seen it played. This is interesting that Video Games Chronicle is even covering Apple Arcade releases, because that doesn't seem like they've done that in the past. But maybe Apple Arcade is becoming more of a thing. A free PlayStation 5 upgrade for Dead Cells is coming later this month. The update will make use of the DuelSense's unique features. Check out this Video Game Chronicles article if you're interested. I already talked about Air Twister. Don't think I want to say anything else. We already talked about IO Interactive's Fantasy being an Xbox exclusive. I already talked about Nintendo wanting to avoid scalping. Apparently, CD Projekt is reflecting on Cyberpunk's launch. Quote, "It became cool to dislike it." I don't think this is the first time that this message has been put out there. It definitely feels like that is kind of the attitude of some people in CD Projekt, is that the reviews were unfairly critical, which honestly that just comes off as unprofessional and childish. At a certain point, if your game was perfect, you have some ground to say maybe some reviews are too critical. And almost certainly there probably were a few critical reviews that were too critical and not really objective. But you really can't call people out on that. You have to let the reader decide whether they agree with or disagree with a reviewer's opinion as it's being stated. But at the end of the day, to embrace bitterness or childishness is to really just say you're putting less focus on fixing Cyberpunk. And I don't think Cyberpunk is fixed even now, as they're trying to put out a DLC that some people are calling a soft reboot of the whole game. There are major problems, some of which are not even really talked about that much with Cyberpunk as I understand it. So, yeah, this is not the kind of article you should bother to put out. And if somebody is interviewing you and you're reflecting, you would have hoped that you would have moved past maybe a knee-jerk opinion like that instead of doubling down and sticking with that opinion. But that whole I'm right and you're wrong attitude is a 2-year-old's attitude, not an attitude that benefits adults trying to make a product and sell a product to other people. Let's see. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom dominated US industry sales in May. It's already the second biggest game of the year based on box sales alone. What is the number one game of the year then? Well, you've got a list here. It's not particularly big. So number one is Zelda, and then you have Hogwarts Legacy, which is still going strong. And I guess, yeah, it feels like as they just released another Hogwarts game, Hogwarts Legacy would deserve to have had more updates or new contents or just advertising around it. But apparently it sells so well it doesn't need to be advertised. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Dead Island 2, MLB The Show 23, FIFA 2023. I'd assume Call of Duty might be number one. Nah, it's got to be Resident Evil 4 is number one. Elden Ring, Minecraft still selling like crazy. Breath of the Wild still selling well. Smash Brothers Ultimate still selling well. New Super Mario Brothers selling pretty well. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet selling well, despite the quality, and Lego Star Wars even lining up here. If anything, if you eliminated Nintendo from this list, Warner Brothers might be the next biggest publisher listed here. Let's see. There's only one God of War Ragnarok Sony game that's published by Sony. There are nothing here from Microsoft, which that perhaps highlights a problem with Microsoft, is that they just don't have anything under their collection, and they should be acquiring companies. But Warner Brothers definitely seems like they might be the best. Technically, I guess Mojang and Minecraft are Microsoft, so they do have that. I wish this article, though, would tell me directly what number one would have been. But whatever. We already talked about the shareholders asking questions and getting very little answers. We already talked about Jim Ryan claiming that publishers dislike the Xbox Game Pass. And we talked about in the last stream the Barbie Xbox Series S, which I think is literally going to be a giveaway product and never actually sold. Which that brings us to the Komatsu articles, which we'll try and burn through these a little bit quicker. Atari announced an arcade shooter reimagining called Quantum Recharge for all consoles and PC. I feel like we had already talked about that. Mugen Soul Z for Switch launches September 14th. Yep. Sword and Fairy N2 for the Switch launches July 27th. This feels like this might be a spin-off game for Sword and Fairy series. Let's see if we can see what this looks like on Steam. Yeah. Definitely feels like a spin-off game, and it seems very poorly received at that. The Atomic Heart DLC launching August 2. Bandai Namco Summer Showcase at Anime Expo 2023 teases, quote, exciting announcements and game reveals, quote, a barrage of news and reveals incoming. These characters don't really seem to mean too much to me. It's basically an announcement for an announcement, though. The free-to-play Tim Tim Showdown is now available for PC. It's a microtransaction-free version of the Creator Collection turn-based RPG. Let's see. So far, seems like people might be enjoying this new free version. Play now 100% free. Online PvP. No in-game purchases at all. Acquire announces a twin-stick shooter called Exodia Rise of the Space Pirates X2 for PS5, Switch, and PC. Due out this fall worldwide. This is where, in particular, the auto blur fails miserably and why it needs to be programmed to only come on after a certain point, because otherwise every time I click around it moves me to a different page, which causes the auto blur to enable again. You know what I could do, probably wouldn't be a terrible idea, is to set it on a cooldown, but that too would be a dangerous thing. If it took 3 or 4 seconds before it could activate a second time, that could be a problem when I'm burning through games very quickly. Yeah. Atelier Rise of shipments topping 2 million, we talked about. Ys 10 Nordics original soundtrack has a mini sample video. Check that out on Gamatsu if you want to listen. Pixel Junk Scrappers Deluxe launches July 27th. This is for Steam, Epic Games Store, and PlayStation Store, it seems. Is this something I would want to put on my fall list, or should I just make a short around it? I'll give it a chance. Asterix and Obelix slapped them all. Oh. Yeah. I don't know if any of these Asterix and Obelix games are really worth playing, but I'd like to give them a chance. Somnium Eterna launches September 14th. It's currently in early access on PC. Let's see what that looks like on Steam. Well, nothing wants to load. Okay. Well, no screenshots want to load. We'll see that this is on fall list. It could have been on the fall list a short time, or could have been on the fall list a long time. That's interesting that it did eventually load, because usually what happens is these just fail miserably. I guess I'll just risk making a second YouTube short, and honestly I'm in a really good position to make second YouTube shorts anyways, because we do have the auto naming function now enabled, potentially, eventually. I'll start doing that, so full named shorts instead of just check out this PC game make a lot of sense. Archetype Arcadia for the PS5 and 4 and Switch is coming to the West in October. Interesting. You have this character that's seemingly in two different worlds. Looks like it's probably a visual novel of some sort. Yeah. I do feel like by having the names, and this may be a bit of a hint for content creators who want to have their own YouTube channel. First of all, as they don't, you'll never succeed these days. Start on a different service where you could grow an audience that might actually see your content. But otherwise, it does seem like having that custom name returns your videos in a search. So if somebody is typing into YouTube specifically, which that's a big if, but it seems to happen, if they're looking for that game, my YouTube shorts are showing up in those results. Maybe not in the #1 spot, but showing up enough that people are actually clicking on them and actually seeing them when directly looking for those games, which means I'm effectively owning some portion of the mind share around those games' names, which is great news because then that potentially acts as a little worm on a hook to hook people into getting to my channel, subscribing to my channel, and then watching the content that I'd prefer they'd watch instead of the automated YouTube shorts. And that's exactly what the YouTube shorts were supposed to do, is act as quick, short ways to get people interested in seeing my channel, or just seeing my channel in general. Titles and thumbnails, that's what they always say. That's the #1 thing. So having a title directly around the game's name works for a gaming content creator. Thumbnails, if they were better, would also almost certainly improve my views and click-through rate. Moving on, everybody won to Switch introducing the games trailer is available if you want to check that out. Almost feels like this horsehead guy is just now the mascot of everybody 1-2 Switch. Was he always the mascot? I don't know. Mordhau for the PS4 and 5 and Xbox One and Series launches July 12th. I think very quickly we're going to stop hearing about games being released on the Xbox One. This is a medieval 64 multiplayer action game. It was already on Steam, but I don't think they're doing anything new for the Steam version. This is one of those games that has too fancy of screenshots for its own good. Feels like they're really trying to hide something. Clearly some of these screenshots are pre-rendered. A lot of them are. This is an online PvP game though, so it's not going to go on my fault list. A game called Fort Solis launches August 12th. New trailer welcomes you to Fort Solis Station. So that probably means we have a release date now. Which I definitely could see myself trying to be more critical of games that don't have release dates and not making YouTube shorts around games that don't have release dates, but there is this real problem that a lot of games don't have a release date, then the next day they do have a release date, and then they don't put out a new press release that they have a release date, so I never hear about them again. Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 Turbocharged has a gameplay trailer and screenshots. Check that out on Gamatsu if you're interested. The life simulator Hello Kitty Adventure Island Adventure has been announced for Apple Arcade, which It's probably a fairly big get for Apple Arcade. Hello Kitty, I imagine, is still fairly popular. Remnant 2, The World of Remnant, Nerude trailer is available if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk has been confirmed for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series. Seemingly not on Steam. Well, those I guess had been already announced. It was coming to Steam. So yeah, no need to make a new YouTube short around that. We already talked about the Sega Genesis games being added to the Nintendo eShop. It would be hard, certainly, for Sega to be acquired when they're doing so much business with Nintendo these days. If they were acquired, then all those Sonic games, which are fairly popular among little kids, would potentially leave the Switch. That would be awkward transition, to say the least. Persona 5 Tacticia has a Morgana trailer if you want to check that out. Red Dead Redemption being rated in Korea. Famitsu scores for 1804. Issue 1804 gives Pretty Princess Magical Garden Island a 28 out of 40. Soul Vars a 31 out of 40. And Trouble Witches Final Episode 1 Daughters of Amalgam a 31 out of 40. So 3 fairly small name games getting fairly small reviews. Let's see, we talked about Final Fantasy shipments. Theorycraft Games debuts its first look at a squad-based PvP game called Project Loki. I guess you could check out this video on Gamatsu if you're interested. A game called Bit Trip Rerunner has been announced. It includes a runner maker tool, which I assume this is a remaster of Bit Trip Runner with new content, which I don't really know what Bit Trip Runner is. Let's see. As far as a game, I recognize the name, but that's about all I can say about it. And this little video certainly didn't help me figure out what Bit Trip Runner is. So moving on, we talked about this horror game Hollow Cocoon, which, while catching my eye, actually lost most of my attention when I watched the trailer and looked at the screenshots. Here we have a top-down multiplayer racer game called Make Way, announced for all consoles and PC. Which, yeah. Notably here, this is once again a situation where, because each of these is underlined in a hyperlink of each console, my rewriting program extension can't replace it. It only can replace things that aren't hyperlinks. Otherwise, it would totally have replaced this to say all consoles. Or it should have, at least. Let's see. A game called Gravity Circuit launches July 13th. It's a side-scrolling action platformer. Let's see if we can look at it on Steam. It kind of has a Mega Man vibe to it, which at a certain level I feel like I'm willing to play some of the Mega Man games, but I probably don't want to play the earliest versions of Mega Man games. I want to play the easiest, most polished versions of Mega Man games, particularly if they were to announce a new reboot of the Mega Man right now, a remaster that had a lot of quality of life improvements. That would be very ideal for me. Moving on, Dokapon Kingdom Connect is coming to PC this fall. They don't have a Steam link for it quite yet, though. And this is more of a Japanese game, so if it comes to the West on PC, I don't know how popular it really would be. Probably not very. A romance visual novel called Shiraha Kira Meku Koe Shirabe is coming to PS4 and Switch on October 26th in Japan. I don't think I pronounced that quite right. Notably, we really haven't seen a lot of announcements for visual novels in the past couple of months. I guess maybe we'll start to see that increase a little bit. And for a while there, we were definitely having a case where the logos and the crops on pictures were different between the PlayStation and the Nintendo Switch versions, and it doesn't seem like that's really the case here as much. But yeah, in the past we've seen logos try to cover up skin or crop out legs and thighs. Here you do have maybe just a little bit of that, where this image is zoomed in a little bit more for the big blue bar at the top, and the logo is scrolled up in a larger way to potentially show off less of legs, but it's not really censoring that much even at that. These are the reversible covers, so it's not super surprising that these are exactly the same, because Sony doesn't really care about the inside of the cover. They care about what you could see on the shelf. Where you would even see this game on the shelf, though, is the next question, because it would almost certainly be up in an adult section of a Japanese game store and nowhere else. PlayStation Plus monthly game lineup for July is announced. It's Alan Wake Remastered, which is probably great timing, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, and Endling Extinction is Forever, which, yeah, not the biggest of games, but something. And then Arcadian Atlas launches July 27th for PC, and then later in 2023 for consoles. Again, that probably lists all the consoles otherwise. Now, as far as this game Arcadian Atlas, I think it probably does deserve a YouTube short, but it does also look like one of these positional placement RPG games that I don't really like, strategy RPG games. That being said, I'm going to give it a chance anyways and just be really generous. I also really love the zoomed in aspect here. It makes the whole game feel kind of more controlled. If anything, this almost has a little bit of Mario RPG feel to it, although it's not really fair to compare anything to Mario RPG, since Mario RPG itself is just aping some pretty standard Japanese RPG turn-based gameplay mechanics that you would have seen in a early Final Fantasy game. Anyways, and that brings us to the GameDeveloper.com news, which probably won't be too much of that. Mooncat Games is a new publishing label hoping to spotlight on the smallest subgenres. The company said it wants to provide small teams with optimistic foundations. Sounds to me like they have made a publishing company without having the funding to make a publishing company. Jaeger is sunsetting the Cycle Frontier after cheaters caused irreparable damage, which that's just bad backup. The studio explained a surge in cheating after a promising launch resulted in a significant decrease in their player base. Well, I guess you can't fix that. Even if you did have backups, once people flee your game because of cheating, they're not likely to come back. Assuming that's the real reason they left in the first place. We already talked about Final Fantasy 16 selling 3 million copies in 1 week. Activision Blizzard won't receive PlayStation dev kits if they're acquired by Microsoft, which, yeah, we had already basically been told that. We simply could not run the risk of a company that was owned by a direct competitor having access to that information, which, fine. That is effectively PlayStation saying, though, that we're going to make it impossible for the next Call of Duty to be as good or as well quality on our console. And there definitely are ways to do that in the right way. If Activision Blizzard was acquired by Microsoft, Sony could easily make a clean room and make a clean room team, make Activision Blizzard make a clean room team, and then people would, from Activision Blizzard, go into that clean room. It would just be like a white room with a dev kit chained to the table, and people would look at it and develop games for it and test games on it, and then that would be that. Of course, anything somebody saw on that clean room team from Activision Blizzard could easily just be spoken and described to everybody else at Microsoft. And if there was, say, a PlayStation 6 that had a 6-disc changer, for instance, which would be a good idea, frankly, the way disk space is going. Obviously, somebody at Activision Blizzard could tell Microsoft that this device has a 6-disc changer in it, so maybe we should have a 6-disc changer in our device too. Not that dev kits actually look anything like the final product anyways, but you could say it has 128 gigabytes of RAM or something like that, and then that would give Microsoft a clue as to how to build their next console. Yep. Regardless of whether this acquisition goes through or not, we basically have been guaranteed that there will be continued fighting and probably lesser quality games in the future because of the continued fighting. So it's not really a positive outlook for gamers, regardless of which outcome happens. And certainly gamers have no good reason to be involved one way or the other, whether the acquisition goes through or not, because exclusives and acquisitions really don't affect gamers positively or in any way that gamers could push back, even if they do affect them. So might as well not care, because gamers are effectively powerless. Nobody is going to really boycott the next PlayStation if the Activision Blizzard merger fails or succeeds. Nobody's going to really boycott the next Xbox if the merger fails or succeeds. Moving on, we already talked about Microsoft considering to acquire Square Enix. Let's see, Infinity Ward has opened a new art-focused office in Spain, which it seems kind of weird to have an office that is just art-focused, but whatever. I'll leave it at that for if you want to check out this article on GameDeveloper.com. Last of Us 2 and Horizon Forbidden West costing $200 million plus to make each. We talked about. And then apparently 43 million US PlayStation owners have played Call of Duty games, which if anything that number might justifiably be larger because there's a decent number of Call of Duty games in the first place. And this statistic could mean somebody played a Call of Duty game on an Xbox original and now they own a PlayStation. That's probably not what the number means, but you could certainly manipulate the numbers to mean that. I had a little bit of trouble with my follow list loading up, so I had to run the macro twice. Again, my next version of this macro I'm hoping to make a lot more robust so it stops crashing as much. Okay, so we have an April 2023 game, gay romance visual novel. We'll give that more time. We have a June 28th Dinosaur Land game. I'll give... Wait, why is this not on the fall list? What happened here? I don't know what just happened there. It jumped me around and it shouldn't have. Where are we? Where were we? Yeah. We were at this point, basically. And then we were going through H things on the fall list. So Hard Steel from 2021 here is a BattleBots clone that just doesn't really have any relevancy, and it's still in early access. In general, BattleBots as a video game makes a lot of sense. And if anything, if you ever want to make a game as your first programming game and you want to learn physics, not a terrible way to work towards that, to make a simplistic game with the BattleBot type creatures fighting each other, type robots. But obviously, if you were to make a program like this, you can't leave it in early access, and you probably can't charge even $1.49 for it, because that gets you 5 user reviews and after several years of it being listed. Here we have a hard bullet game. Looks like it might be a VR first person shooter. It's in early access since 2020. It's gotta go. It doesn't look terrible in its screenshots. Doesn't look amazingly great, but doesn't look terrible either. It's also extremely positively reviewed. But I have just zero tolerance for things that are early access games forever after several years. Next we have Happy's Humble Burger Farm, which looks like it is a horror game online, the likes of Five Nights at Freddy's. Sorta very positive. Single player. I don't know if I'd really ever want to play this, but it is meeting all the requirements, so I'm gonna put this on the wish list. Of course, the problem here is, while the wish list grows every couple days, the wish list never really shrinks as far as buying games or doing even a wish list cleanup. This is from December. I think Land Trilogy can go. And I really just don't have the time to play games, even if I had the money to purchase games. Hank Straightjacket is a free game. It's mostly positive. It came out in February. I'm gonna leave it on the fall list. Henny looks like it's more of an asset flip game than it really should be, and it's just not relevant, and it's in early access, so that can leave. Handyman Corporation is mixed reviewed, so that can leave the fall list. Handshakes is some kind of puzzle game. It's free, it's overwhelmingly positive, so let's put that on the wish list. Although, in all fairness, let's just add it to the library. Well, I will deal with that later. Hamster Playground is very positive. Does this... It's early access from 2022. Doesn't have any in-app purchases. Seems like it does. Weirdly, they don't label things as having in-app purchases over here as much nowadays when you have these shop items available. It's a shame. There's kind of a level of polish here that would make me say yes, but I am definitely not going to stick around for something that has in-app purchases like that and is in early access. Meanwhile, Hamster Bliss from February of 2022 has 7 reviews. Let's look at the user reviews. Early access. Yeah, I guess it's a Super Monkey Ball clone, except for it's an actual hamster and a hamster ball, which I'm surprised there aren't more Super Monkey Ball clones or Katamari Damacy clones with a hamster and a hamster wheel. Should I give this more time? Not really, but I will. I'd like that to actually succeed. Now we'll go through all the new games coming out on Steam. Let's see. Idol Ultimate is nothing. Imprecision is nothing. Limit Choice looks like it might be something, but probably is nothing. Give it a chance. Should I make a YouTube short around it? I'll say no. Salty Hounds is already mostly negative. Interesting. Usually you don't see a game that's mostly negative. English and Korean. Wonder why people hate it so much. The game has reached over 17,000 of its fundraiser goal on a Korean fundraising website, Tumblebug. Many backers have requested refunds several months prior, but no updates. The game got delayed for some time without any consistent updates. That was the first red flag, so it's my fault that I ignored the obvious observation and purchased the game with wishful thinking that it probably has have a reasonable, substantial amount of content. Eventually I was wrong. Evidently, I was wrong. Screenshots and videos were up for months with no updates on the gameplay, minigames, or even just different glimpses of the game. Do not buy this game. It frequently crashes and gameplay feels a bit lost and empty. So people are not happy because they kickstarted this game and seemingly it is not a real finished product. Here we have a hidden object game which we can make a YouTube short around. Bombing to a graffiti paradise. Yeah, there might be something to that. Outbreak 2030 is already mixed. This is probably an asset flip zombie survival shooter game. It doesn't look terrible though. Let's see. Worst game of the year. Hideous controls, stock Unity assets, boring level design, story, text to speech, voice actors, and settings which don't have save any settings. So yeah. It does certainly seem like people are getting back into the mood of really wanting to play games and review games, which it feels like in the past couple of weeks with the Summer Game Fest, they were more in the mood to just be hyped about games that aren't even coming out anytime soon, instead of playing what is available. I don't think I'd ever want to play a game called Outbreak 2030 at this point anyways. Anything that reminds you of the COVID pandemic is probably a negative thing. Story of Seasons, A Wonderful Life. We'll obviously give that a follow and put that on the follow list. Sky is a city builder. Don't think has quite enough polish to it. Doomsday Derby. Doesn't look good enough. Gladiators Arena. Doesn't feel like there's quite enough. One of the things here too is that anything that's set in an arena that looks like a Vampire Survivors clone probably shouldn't be in an arena. No Roy. Looks like a frustration platformer, which I guess I should make YouTube shorts around those, even though I don't like those kinds of games. Grab the Goblins. Seems like this is a hidden object game of some different style. I'm going to put this on the follow list just to see if people like that style differently. Waking Atlas. Doesn't look like anything of interest. VR Travel is a little tiny small dwarf. Doesn't look like anything other than some asset flips. Although the idea of being on a roller coaster going around different environments isn't the worst thought ever. Let's see, here we have our first adult game, My Neighbor's Lonely Wife 2, which I feel like we saw My Neighbor's Lonely Wife 1 on Monday, and in a lot of ways I'm not sure if this isn't the exact same screenshots for My Neighbor's Lonely Wife 1. Yeah, My Neighbor's Lonely Wife 1 came out June 23rd, so basically a week ago. It is selling, Lonely Wife 2 is selling for $8.99, English, Japanese, and Chinese, and yeah. There's nothing here in this flat 2D anime style adult game that really screams like it's doing anything that special, or that you would want to play it amongst even the collection of adult games that you could play on Steam. Let's see, Nocturia the game. Is a horror asset flip game better if you're playing as a little kid with a little kid lantern instead of a flashlight? Or is it worse? I think it's worse. But I don't know for certain, so I'm gonna put that on the follow list. I want to see what other people's reaction to that is. I feel like putting a child in perceived danger is almost certainly a worse idea than just making a generic horror game. I just don't think people would enjoy that story and that narrative. Spirit Toll here. Looks nicely animated, so I'm going to give this a chance. And then we have an adult game with 3D CGI called Open Flower. Pre-rendered CGI probably. Looks like there's a bunch of people, but kind of only one Asian lady, and then just a lot of other characters. The 3D models here are particularly different than what you usually see, because usually you see just the exact same 3D models, slightly tweaked. Or this feels like this may have come from a different animator or a different asset store. But I don't think that's particularly better. And a lot of the characters have really plastic looking skin and just like very bad models. This game is also apparently called Red Hot. It's $8.99. It's English, Spain, Spanish, and Hindi, which maybe that's why the visuals are a little bit different, is that this is not a Asian as in Chinese or Japanese lady. It is instead an Asian as in India. I could see some of the male characters being Indian also. Well, that is slightly different, but not that different. There are definitely some beautiful looking Indian people, as there are beautiful looking people all around the world. But I've yet to see adult games or video games in general try to have Indian characters that often. There's like one game and one Indian company I can think of, Raji, and that's it. So we may see a lot more going in the future, but right now it is still a fresh market. 15-minute dungeon doesn't look like anything. Panpuja doesn't look like anything. Is this another Indian game? Doesn't seem like it. It only supports English. Just looks like a weird game. Let's see. Dinosaur Land aerial photography. VR game. We'll give that a follow. That might be the reason why the links jumped around. I need to change how my plugin for duplicate tabs works. Neon Fantasy Birds doesn't look like anything of interest. And then we have Element Core Revelations Journey Prologue. That doesn't look like anything. Runes Magica might be something. I'll give it a chance. I hope I'm almost done here. Dave the Diver. That one I had already put on the fall list because that was being promoted. Now, why is this game being promoted? I've never heard of this developer, this publisher. So, it does seem like there's a lot of people playing it online for a single player game. And it's overwhelmingly positive. So, is there something, if a game turns out to just be really, really successful, that all of a sudden it would be promoted on the front page with a special banner on Steam? Or did this developer and publisher just manage to pay enough to Steam to have it specially promoted? I don't know. Definitely seems like there's a lot going on here as far as different mini games that you can do. Yeah, it feels like a real game, but yeah, I guess I just will keep that on the fall list, and then when I go around again, it will almost certainly be put on the wish list. I could really just put it on the wish list right now. This is all over the place as far as the different things you do, and Dave as a character. Like, he definitely seems like there is a real personality that they've written there. Let's see. Next we have On Dark Terms, which is probably nothing, but I'm gonna give it a chance. Should I make a YouTube short around it? Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that and risk it. Like, I feel like I'm gonna start getting enough views on YouTube Shorts to start getting feedback around that. Village and Monsters. I'll be generous and put this on the full list, but I'm not gonna make a short around it. Shock Comp Fantasy Chess. Interesting idea. Make chess, but make it more of a fantasy game. I still have quite a few things to do. Games to cover. Family Adventure here. Looks like it is just an 8-bit RPG maker type game. Say no to that. Don't let him in. Looks terrible, so I'm gonna say no to that. Reverie Sweet Ass Edition. I'll give that a chance. Prediction game doesn't look like anything. Also doesn't feel like on this Wednesday we're going to have that many adult games. Just one anime adult game and one CGI realistic adult game. Nothing to say about Small Tank. Spy Rumble. This is an online PvP game. Some kind of card element to it. I guess I'll make a short on it. I don't want to agonize over decisions. Resource management game. I'll give it a chance. Gun to the Zone. Doesn't look like anything other than a Vampire Survivors clone. Revival Recolonization. Looks like it has enough polish to be given a chance. Picoe. Yeah, give that a chance. Cyclones. Looks like a really old game, but maybe a brand new game. Regardless, it's not really relevant, historically speaking. So, developer Raven Software. Really? Same Raven Software as all of these games? It's possible. It is possible that it is an old Activision game. Suppose if you were to buy all of the Activision Blizzard games, particularly if a whole bunch of games that are not on Steam came to Steam, there might be a decent bundle there too. Yeah, it does feel like there might be a decent bundle that could be purchased if you could buy everything from the developer. But noticeably, Steam never really forced developers to make bundles with all their products on it. So there isn't a default discount if you did try to buy everything from Activision Blizzard, if everything from Activision Blizzard was on Steam. And in all fairness, I would end up with a bunch of Call of Duty games I would never actually play just to own StarCraft and Warcraft and Diablo games. These must be old games. Necrodome. These must be just really old Quake/Doom clones that never were big enough for me to even notice back when they came out. That would have probably been a game released these would have probably been games released when I was playing either Nintendo games or Xbox 360 games and not really playing PC games. Plus, back in the day, finding PC games was a lot more difficult. It's still pretty difficult even now, but without the internet, Tides of Despair is not really showing me much. I guess the question is, do I want to be in a very desolate situation on an almost desert island? Actually trying to just survive, compared to something like Raft, where there's just like a lot of ridiculous crafting and building. Yeah, I don't think there's enough being shown in these screenshots to say yes to that. Tamageddon. Doesn't look like anything. For VR. Cornhole VR. I'll put this on the follow list. Tetrageddon games. Looks like just a troll joke game. Court, Connect, and Capture. Looks very poorly animated, so I'm going to say no to that. Slavic Punk Old Timer. I'm going to give that a chance. And then our last game is Amaro Chocolate 2, which is probably Animal Chocolate in Japanese. We'll give that a chance and make a YouTube short around that. And then that's the end of the show. And at that point, the auto blur probably should have disabled, so it still doesn't feel like I quite have it programmed right. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. Sorry for starting so late, sorry for going so long and having that awkward silent point in the middle. Live apologies today. Anyways,